stages and patterns of physical growth. People differ in growth patterns, and there are recognised growth states and patterns of growth. So there's general kind of rules that you can kind of look at. But you know it's important to understand. Some children will begin a growth spurt earlier than others, and some will be faster. So it's having an understanding of individuals, not just categorising as groups. So looking at this table here, we have prenatal, so from conception to birth, is very fast growth. The head and trunk grow faster than the legs. Sitting at height birth is 85% of the total body weight. So moving on from birth to 2 years, this is again a very fast period. So we saw that from the graph through the S-curve, especially in the early months of infancy. So the head and trunk are still growing comparatively faster. Early childhood from 2 to 6, this is where we start to have a slower growth rate. Lower legs grow faster than the head and trunk, so we start, the kids start developing into their limbs. So sitting height at 6 years is 55% of the total body height. Middle childhood, so this is between 6 and 10. So this is a slower growth rate, but some children exhibit mid-growth spurt between 6.5 and 8.5, so they might have a little bit of a growth spurt in that period. Late childhood through early adolescence, this is between 10 and 15 years of age. So again, this is on that S-curve, this is the fast period of growth. So this is where sexual maturation begins, but also the body shape and composition changes. And we're going to look at body shape and composition during today's session. The middle to late adolescence, so this is 15 to 20 years, is a slower growth rate. So continuation of sexual maturation and continuation of body shape and composition. So it's really important to consider these different stages of growth and development, especially when we're working with children in a sporting context, because it may impact what you do and how you deliver. What I will say, as I mentioned at the start, kids develop and grow at different rates and start at different growth spurts. So I think a prime example of this could be, as a teenager, I remember my older brother was always so much shorter than all his classmates. They all shot up and had their growth spurts quite early. And he actually didn't have his growth spurts up quite late, so he was always kind of a short. And now, as a late mature, he's obviously gone through his growth spurt and is a lot taller than his friends that were previously, overtower him during sort of high school. So as I said, there's different patterns of growth and maturation. You can't kind of have a set, this is how it's going to happen for every single individual. There's standardised kind of approaches and standardised periods of growth, but there may be slight variations and differences, and it's important to consider that. So types of growth. An individual passes through different stages. There are 4 main categories of growth and development. Okay, so these are the physical, then it's obviously the mental, the cognitive, so that's the kind of psychological area, the emotional and social. So growth follows a sequence of development and follows a predictable pattern. Children stand before they can walk and walk before they can run. So these are going to impact, again, how we also work and deliver in sport when we're working with younger children. We're going to look at this when we move into motor skill development and fundamental movement skills. Children gradually build up on skills and learn how to talk, how to walk. Time of growth varies from child to child. And it can differ from sex, so from boys to girls, and maybe slight variations. And again, we will be looking at this in more detail as we move on to motor skill development and fundamental movement skills. Okay, so we're going to break down these 4 areas of physical, mental, emotional and social, and look at them in a little bit more detail. So, physical development is a growth of development of the body's muscles, bones, energy systems and nervous systems. So the body growth, change in height and weight, muscle and nerve development, changes in the size of organs. Muscular development allows for children to perform basic tasks such as walking by the age of 2 and running by the age of 3. So there's going to be some key stages of development that occur. Mental or cognitive. This is an individual's ability to interpret and process information, so it's the emotional development or the development of a person's self-concept, awareness or of oneself or others. So this is around intellectual development, learning to solve problems, making judgments and dealing with different situations. Again, all crucial when we're working in sport, being able to make decisions and solve problems and decide things for themselves, is going to have an impact on how we work and deliver to children. So the emotional side of it, again, as someone working with children, we need to understand the emotional development. Emotional development is the expression of control of feelings. So it can also include social development, so in terms of relationship with peers, friends, relatives, adults and others in the outside world. So we're looking at how the way kids react, their feelings, learn to control certain responses to emotions. And you'll often see this with young children when you're delivering with sport, you know, the bad loser who has his tantrum and kind of gets really upset or gets really angry. So how that they start to learn to deal with their emotions. And sport is a great facilitator of trying to develop emotional development with children and dealing with situations that might not occur in normal life. So, you know, learning how to be a good loser or learning how to deal with their anger in a positive way or frustration. So all these things they're going to experience through sport. So we as coaches need to have an understanding of this emotional development and, you know, the stages that impact it. The other thing, obviously, especially when working with interaction, you know, interaction relationships with others, that social side of it, so working as a team, communicating with each other, and you'll see, you know, pivotal points of, you know, early childhood where kids will be more sort of have play that's more independent and insular on their own, and when they start to cooperate and work with others. So that change from sort of 2, 3 to 4 is a very big change in that social interaction, and which obviously when we're working in sport, we need to consider the activities we design to encourage social development. So, points to consider. Children are not mini adults, so the activities, sessions, programs, you know, whether we're a manager of sport, whether we're a person face-to-face, whether we're a coach educator, you know, when we're working with children and youth, we need to consider the development and that's growth and maturation and all the key principles that will have an impact on the programs we design. Children have different proportions in body size, so they may have smaller heads, short extremities and smaller torsos. So again, all these key points will impact on what we do. It's important to understand the differences of boys and girls. So we're going to look at this in more detail when we move on to motor skill development and look at the difference between males and females. And again, as I've highlighted earlier, maturation happens at different rates and stages. So not everybody will mature and grow at the same rate. Okay, so I mentioned about kind of changes. So there's another kind of principle which is worth mentioning as part of this introduction, is the adolescent awkwardness. So this is an approach. There's actually no definitive research to back up these ideas, but there's lots of kind of comments and points within coaching and journals and resources that kind of discusses this adolescent awkwardness. So what is adolescent awkwardness? This is a temporary disruption in motor abilities during adolescence, described as clumsiness or awkwardness or poor coordination. So what they've kind of suggested is that rapid growth is linked to throughout the, you know, increase in height, mean that children outgrow their muscular strength, so they become uncoordinated. Also, the growth in feet is reported to cause temporary disruption of agility and coordination. So have an understanding of how, as a teenager, as our body's growing, it may impact our coordination. I'm not saying this happens for everybody, but there's been cases where this has been identified. So to conclude this introductory session, I'd like you to actually look at doing a task. So as a coach, how would you respond to a young performer who's experiencing difficulties in their motor control due to their changing body proportions? So this could be, you know, a young child, it could be an older sort of teenager who's going through that puberty period and these growth spurts. What I'd like you to do is jot down some ideas of what you would do as a coach to kind of react to this and respond and help that child in this circumstance. Okay, so hopefully you should have come up with some ideas for this. Some possible suggestions or considerations, is take into account growth stages when you're teaching new movements. Maybe recognise limitations and maybe don't expect too much. And help the young performer understand their changes and reassure them that they will adapt. You know, because obviously it could have a knock-on effect in their self-confidence and motivation if they suddenly decrease in skill level or coordination. Group performers on the same level of development stage, so you're not matching kids who've shot up and grown against, you know, less mature children. So again, it's having that balance. These are just some basic examples of things you need to consider. You may have come up with some further ones of your own, but hopefully this introductory session has given you some ideas to start thinking about growth and maturation and how that affects you as a person working with children and youth.